have the Jerusalem Day on Thursday, which is the occasion for ultra-nationalists in Israel to march in the Muslim quarter of the Old City, now Jerusalem, and the Nakba, the creation of the State of Israel, are two sacrosanct dates in the Palestinian calendar. So it could be that this rocket was just the beginning of another sort of celebration. The Nakba Day tomorrow, celebration in inverted comma, of course, the Nakba Day tomorrow, and Jerusalem Day. I think that tension is still very high, and we'll see. It's difficult to know, but one thing is clear. If Israel wants to change the equation, and reestablish its deterrence, it will probably have to react.
Yes, we are now confirming that there was at least one rocket fired, and there were sirens south of you in the city of Sderot, which you know very well yourself. But over there in Ashkelon, I see, Pierre, that life seems pretty normal. Nobody's really concerned behind you.
Right. I'm not sure that everybody has digested the news and has heard the boom. We heard the boom from here, but I'm not sure that everybody is still aware of that. That's why it took people by surprise, I think. It took us by surprise. We didn't expect that at all. When I read the alert, the push on the Home Front Command application, I thought it was a joke. But then a few seconds later, we heard a boom. And, when you hear a boom, you realize, okay, we are back into the mode of confrontation, or at least at the beginning of it.
Pierre Chandler in Ashkelon, thank you very much for that. Pierre Steckelbach here in the studio. We are in the middle of a ceasefire, supposedly, brokered by the Egyptians that started last night. Everything was quiet today, and suddenly this, right?
I would say, yes, that this is quite surprising. We're talking about less than a day after that ceasefire was brokered. It should have come into effect yesterday at 10. We have seen that there were still some rockets fired from Gaza into Israel after that ceasefire. That was not something very uncommon. We know that also from previous ceasefires. But now, again, less than a day after that ceasefire was brokered, that we see now at least one rocket that was now officially confirmed by the IDF that was launched from Gaza into the southern areas. That is still quite surprising. Now, of course, there are several questions that that need to be answered now. Is that a rocket that is coming from the Palestinian Islamic Jihad that has suffered severe damage, not only to its infrastructure, where the death toll is at 30, most of them senior Palestinian Islamic Jihad commanders, or is Hamas now also intervening in that fighting? But again, that comes quite surprisingly. We're talking about the rocket that apparently, according to initial reports, landed in an open area, so it did not have to be intercepted. There are no reports of any damage or any injuries as of now. The question also is now, Jacob, is that the only rocket that was launched or that will be launched? How is this going to unfold? Now, we knew that was a tense calm. We are talking about 5 days of fighting. Again, severe blow to Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. But there's a significant event upcoming only in a couple of days, the Jerusalem Day and the Flag March on Thursday. That is traditionally an event that could trigger rockets. We're talking about an ultra-nationalist right-wing march through the old city of Jerusalem, also through the Muslim quarter. That is an event that has triggered rockets from Hamas before. That was one of the main triggers for that military escalation 2 years ago. That was a day that Israeli security forces were looking at with quite some worry. Now that rockets are launched, or one rocket is launched only a couple of hours, really, we have to say, after that ceasefire was brokered, is quite surprising, and also for sure for those residents in the south who now thought that they could breathe after those really difficult 5 days. We have to see how this is going to unfold, and if this is going to remain the only rocket now.
Right. We have Dr. Jacques Neria with us on the phone now. Jacques, rather on Zoom. I guess the question is now, will Israel feel obligated to react? I mean, Israeli government has presented this zero tolerance policy. So what's next?
Well, I think that basically now the intelligence, all the intelligence agencies will concentrate on this missile in order to understand was it shot by mistake? Was it fired by a faction that does not accept the ceasefire that was agreed upon with the mediation of Egypt? We'll have to wait in order to elaborate, to understand and to elude what is behind this rocket. If it's only one rocket that has been fired by mistake or by coincidence, I think that Israel can bear that, and especially that it did not hit any center. It was just fired in the wild. So let's see and wait a little bit in order to understand. It will take some time, and we will understand very well that if this is intentional, then Israel will have no choice but to respond.
Right. We should emphasize there were no injured. It was one rocket that was fired, and it somehow fell into some open field. So no real damage and no injured. And the question is, again, I guess, Jacques, is this just a coincidence, an accident, sometimes misfiring? Or do you see?
You must understand, Jacob, that the atmosphere is it's almost euphoria is in the Gaza Strip. They believe and they are certain that they have won the battle against Israel. And standing a small organization like the Islamic Jihad, standing with facing the mightiest army in the Middle East, and not accepting a dictate by Israel to stop fire. This brings a lot of people there to try to test Israel's tolerance and test Israel's the stance. And it might be that one wild Palestinian faction, which is not Hamas and which is not part of Islamic Jihad, might be somebody independent who just tried his luck and see if he can trigger a reaction, and this reaction will again bring us into a full confrontation like the same as the 5 last days.
Now, about this ceasefire, of course, everybody says we're winning, we won, and we are not sure what are exactly the terms. This is quite confidential by the Egyptians, right?
Look, I mean, if you analyze the declaration that was published by the Egyptians, you understand very well that the main issue was the targeting of leaders and officers of the Islamic Jihad. And instead of a definite specific wording that Israel refused to, we have a very murky formula saying that attacking persons and houses of families. So, in fact, this implies from the Palestinian side that this is against targeting done by Israel against leaders, and Israel understands that it can go on because it is not the definition is so wide that you can say that it doesn't include military people and terrorists. So this is what was reached. I mean, but if we remember that there were 2 other conditions. One was the cancellation of the flag march in Jerusalem, and the second was the return of the body of Khudr Adnan, the Palestinian who died from hunger strike. We don't hear anything on those 2 points, and certainly the march in Jerusalem was the thing that triggered 2 years ago Hamas to fire into Jerusalem. So we might be very close to a new confrontation in the next 2 days.
Right. And I saying again, the rhetoric from the relatively new Israeli government is we are not going to give up anything, not the body and not anything of this, but we don't know what's inside this agreement. Pia, here in the studio, are you hearing anything else about what's going on?
Well, as of now, there is still that now official confirmation from the Israeli army that one rocket was launched from the Gaza Strip. It fell into an open area. We do not have any reports of damage or of injuries. That comes, of course, Jacob, only less than a day after that ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad was brokered. It should have come into effect yesterday at 10 p.m. We have seen some rockets from Gaza after that. Nothing unusual, but now that rocket rocket launch from the Gaza Strip poses, of course, new questions. Was it an accident? Was it intentional launch of a rocket? Where does it come from? Is it Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or did Hamas decide to join the fighting? We, of course, are after a very, very tense period of 5 days, especially for the residents in the south. Rocket alert went off in communities like Nativa, Sarazikim, and also Ashkelon, which are communities that had to deal with restrictions and heavy rocket fire throughout these past 5 days. Of course, Palestinian Islamic Jihad has agreed to a ceasefire. We're not sure in terms of what the specific contents of that ceasefire are, but it has been violated as of now. Now, of course, this incident is under investigation. The most important question, I think, is to investigate whether that was an intentional rocket launch or whether it was an incident, an accident. And then the question is, how and if will Israel react to that?
Right. So again, one rocket was fired at Israel, no injured, no damage, and we are monitoring what's going on, as I guess Israeli authorities do also, with the questions of whether to react, how to react, and was it just an accident or something that was not pre-planned. Dr. Marwa Maziar is with us now to speak a little bit about the Egyptian part, Marwa. This is a deal, a ceasefire, again brokered by the Egyptians, and I guess they are in some way are the guarantors of this really happening, right?
No, I don't think Egyptians are guarantors of anything at this point. I think Egypt was upset that this had to happen right away after 2 months of having reached the Sharm el-Sheikh agreement back in March, and then all the escalations that did happen during Ramadan and Passover. So I think Egypt, with this particular one, thinks that the escalation shouldn't have happened, but Israel determined that there are preemptive measures that had to be taken because there were some intelligence that maybe Islamic Jihad were planning something. So this is Israel's narrative, and that's what happened the past 5 days. So for Egypt's part, it's already going back to March as when they signed that. They didn't want escalation since back then. But then that happened, and now there was some ceasefire, and that happened again the past 5 days, and now there is a fragile ceasefire. So in a sense, the message from Egypt is, I'm going to mediate and help you, both sides, but you have to rise up to this occasion as well. Otherwise, it's on your it's on your watch that this happened. Like the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs didn't even put a statement about the ceasefire this time. I mean, it was announced, but it's a bit. I think there is as I say, there is a level of frustration that had to happen, and now it ended. But then you're saying even there is one rocket thrown in there. I think this is just an after effect, maybe an accident of some sort. But the calm will be restored for a little bit until we see what's the next round of escalation.
Right. So with Egypt so much involved, not for the first time, for many times, what about taking it to the next level? Not just when fire breaks out.
What is the next level?
A peace agreement?
Oh, of course. Well, from Egypt's side, they are doing. They were the Minister of Foreign Affairs was in with the Germans and the French discussing what's called the Munich framework. Supposedly, the Jordanians, Germans, and French and Egyptians were talking about that since 2020. So before the Abraham Accords. So supposedly, Egypt is going on that track of the two-state solution and all of this. But I think at this point, with the Israeli current government, there's no room for this, because Israel itself, its own internal politics are playing out a very right-wing and religious-toned politics at this point. The sacredness and the holiness of the land and all of this, characters like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, these people are expressing themselves.
But Marwa, even before Smotrich and Ben Gvir and so on, the Israeli claim is always that Hamas does not want any kind of permanent arrangement, and there's nothing to talk about on their side. So it's both ways.
But I think there were developments even concerning Hamas. At least the conversation should be with the more moderate side of the Palestinians, those in the West Bank. So even if not Hamas itself is not on board, then there is someone else that we could still have a discussion with. But I think we're not in a moment of having any of these two-state solution talk. Things are playing out in a very religionized and extreme version of things from the Israeli side, and I think this will have to play out for a while until we even reach any further conversation about what might be the future like.
Right, but in any case, this is a clear interest of Egypt to be a part of this.
Definitely, Egypt is going to be a constant, for better or worse. It's in its national interest. Gaza is on its border. Israel is on its border. Whatever instability there affects it. It hopes that there is calm there. But as I'm saying, Israel has to be very careful at this point, because as Egypt is concerned with things in Sudan and things better in Libya, but anyway, on its borders, it might start thinking, okay, you also face the music. Israel is having instability there. So either fix it or live with it. But I think Egypt is so experienced with all of this that it will always outlast any flare-up of any violence, but definitely it's always going to be part of this picture because of the geography, because of the borders.
Right. Marwa, I thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is actually the time for Middle East Now here on I24 News. As you know, it's 7 p.m. Israel time, where we have mainly news from all parts of the Middle East. But now we have breaking news after a rocket was fired to Israel from Gaza. No injured, no damage, but this is in the middle of a ceasefire that was actually was approached last night. And we are following this. So we are waiting for more information. But meanwhile, I24 News' Owen Alterman takes us back to the latest round of fighting and what was different this time.
Saturday night, Gaza City. The ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian Islamic Jihad has just come into effect. And at least among the hundreds gathered here, the sense is that the Palestinian side won.
It was the solidarity of the resistance factions, and this is victory, and this is the beginning of liberation. National unity is the basis of liberation, and this is the beginning.
On the other side of the border, the feeling on this day after is not necessarily that Israel lost. An Israeli campaign more limited than past rounds, focused only on Palestinian Islamic Jihad, targeting and killing at least 6 high-level PIJ operatives, and at least after the initial strike, with few civilian casualties and no apparent operational mistakes.
I praised the military chief of staff and the head of the Shin Bet security service with 2 words, well done. And the execution was in fact perfect, with total surprise and continuous initiative.
Still, of course, an escalation that severely disrupted life in Israel's south, with tens of thousands of Israelis evacuating their homes temporarily to avoid constant rocket threats. The Iron Dome rocket defense system can turn that rocket threat from a danger to that severe disruption.
It is clear that this situation has an effect. People with small children are frightened and afraid to go out. There's no work, but we will survive.
And so another Israel-Gaza ceasefire that changes little. Palestinian terror groups are still committed, after 16 years in power in Gaza, to their mukawama, or resistance strategy. Israel can still contain them effectively, though not defeat them. There may be a turning point in the dynamics between Israel and Gaza someday. That day is not now.
We are now with Dr. Jacques Neria, an expert on Middle Eastern affairs here. Jacques, ceasefire was, as we saw, achieved last night. And then, right now, a rocket fired at Israel. What could be the reason for that?
Well, Jacob, let me remind you that a few years ago, during the leadership of the previous chief of staff, we had some mishaps with the systems that are in the Gaza Strip, and some missiles were fired because of failure in electricity. As you know, those missiles are buried in the ground and activated by remote control. So it could be that there was a malfunction, and this is what happened in one of those missiles that was fired ultimately in the direction of Israel. I don't think that right now that it is intentional, and we'll have just to wait and see. As I said, I don't think that it is in their interest right now to bring Israel into action again. Certainly not at this point, because they have to breathe a little bit, to reorganize and prepare themselves to the coming events. It's the Nakba and then the flag march in Jerusalem, and then the Naksa on the 5th of June. Lots of events, and one missile right now could disrupt or derail their efforts. And there are so much in a state of I would say euphoria, where they're thinking that really they have won the war against Israel, that I don't think that they might do anything that would jeopardize this reality.
Okay, stay with me, Jacques. Let me bring in Mr. Or Issachar, head of research at the IDSF. What do you make, Or, of this rocket that was fired just a few minutes ago?
Yeah, well, I think the details are still very initial, but look, Yaakov, it has become almost comic, okay, that this sort of event keep happening out of, either mishaps or electricity failure or misconnection or whatever that may be. But I think the greater question we need to ask ourselves is, what was the objective of the Shield and Arrow operation? If the objective was to restore Israeli deterrence, then we need to strike hard against any attempt to break the ceasefire. And if indeed it has become clear that PIJ or Hamas is behind that shooting, then I think the Israeli home front has signaled its leadership that it's more than ready and more than capable to give them a back win, or sort of have their back whenever they want to relaunch strikes in Gaza. I think while the details are still initial, I think the Israel is looking forward. Let's say the Israeli public is looking forward for the seizure, for this to stop this kind of non-relenting rounds vis-a-vis Gaza.
Right, but the conflict. If Israel reacts swiftly, then it might escalate to another round, and I think Israel is not interested in that.
And again, I don't think Israel is interested in that, but I don't think that would be the end of the world either. That means that the Israeli public is ready and is having its leadership's back in any sort of scenario. I don't think Israel should be deterred by any terrorist organization. And of course, it's easy to sit in the studio or at home and interpret, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's the interest of the Israeli leadership either to show weakness, especially after 5 days of infighting such as these.
Okay, Or Issachar, thank you very much for that. Pia here in the studio, Pia Steckelbach, I-24 News correspondent. Let's recap. What do we know?
Right, Jacob, only a couple of minutes ago, probably half an hour ago, there was one rocket, as of what we know right now, fired from the Gaza Strip. It fell into open territory, did not have to be intercepted. There are no reports about damage or any injuries. That comes less than a day after that ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad brokered by Egypt that was meant to go into effect at 10 p.m. Yesterday night. Now, what is interesting here is to see whether this was an an accident that came from Gaza that was an unintended launch, or if it was intended. These circumstances are under investigation now, also from the side of the Israeli security forces. What is interesting, Jacob, that the rocket was launched only about half an hour ago after a spokesman of the military wing of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad held a speech kind of praising the achievements of that previous round of fighting, where after 5 days of fighting, of heavy fighting between the Palestinian Islamic Jihad Jihad and Israel. The question is now, will this turn into another round of fighting? Will Israel respond to that? But again, the circumstances are still under investigation. Of course, now also security forces have to look for shrapnels that might have come down. We have heard rocket alert in several Israeli communities, Natif al-Sara, Ashkelon. That was also areas which were heavily targeted by the fighting in the previous days. Now, of course, Jerusalem Day and the ultranationalist flag march are ahead on Thursday. That has traditionally been an event that triggered fighting with Hamas. That was one of the main triggers for the war 2 years ago between Israel and Hamas. Now, that ceasefire that was brokered was a quite volatile one. It was a tense calm today, especially for the southern communities, but it was certainly not expected that it would be broken so soon. Again, it was meant to get into effect only at 10 p.m. yesterday night. The circumstances are under investigation, whether it was intentional or an accident.
Right. Yeah, thank you very much. Back to you, Jacques Neria. All signs point to probably a misfire here of some sort. But what about the argument that Israel should react in any case, in any kind of rocket launching towards Israel?
It would be really stupid to react on something that is right now, was fired in the wild. And certainly, this is not typical of a salvo. We're talking about one lonely rocket that was fired, misfired, and didn't hit anything. So, there's no reason right now to go back your horses and put your saddles and go on into the Gaza Strip again. This is really not the time to do so. It's the time, instead of using the usual rhetoric that we won and we won and we won, let's concentrate on saying what sort of strategy do we have to think about concerning the Gaza Strip. Can we live with that? Can we live all the time containing the threat and diminishing the threat, or do we have to act differently in the future? You asked earlier if there are any chances of peace. How can you talk peace when you don't have a partner? Hamas, on the covenant of Hamas, Paragraph 2 talks about the annihilation of the Hebrew state. There's no Israel to talk about. And the Islamic Jihad is a terrorist organization. These are the partners that we have in order to talk, really.
Okay, Jacques, thank you very much. Stay with us for more coverage of what's happening in the south and in Gaza. And also, after this break, it's Decision Day in Turkey. We'll have the latest on the most dramatic elections in 2 decades. We'll be right back.